Anna Lena Siedler, if I said that properly, close enough, close enough. And your talk is on prevalence and characteristics of data sharing policies across the health research life cycle, funders, ethics committees, trial registries, journals, and data repositories. Over to you.
Quite a title, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm presenting today on behalf of my PhD student, Aidan Tan. He unfortunately couldn't get out of his clinical duties, but I do believe he's joining us online. So if there are questions I can't answer, maybe he can answer them in the chat. So in our research group, we run a lot of individual participant data meta-analyses, for which we request data directly, usually directly from the trialists, instead of taking data from publications. And we are frequently struck by A, how many researchers are unwilling or take a lot of convincing to share their data, but B, also how many researchers don't even understand the concept of data sharing. So our requests for row by row data are met with, but you can see my results in the publication. And this experience that we're having has also been found in a lot of studies, one of which Aidan has actually led recently, looking at data sharing statements in the Australian New Zealand Clinical Trial Registry, where we found that while 77% of researchers said that they supported data sharing in principle, only 40% intended to share their own data, and even less, 22% committed to sharing data in their trial registration record. So that shows there is a problem here. Not enough researchers are willing to share their data, which is important much beyond individual participant data meta-analysis. Now, how do we educate and change behavior in researchers? We believe that one key answer lies with the stakeholders they interact with: the funders, ethics committees, trial registries, journals, and data repositories throughout the health research lifecycle. And this motivated us to conduct the present researchers, to systematically assess what do important stakeholders do and recommend and request in terms of data sharing. Now we looked at the 110 largest funders, 124 national ethics committees, all 18 clinical trial registries, the 5 highest impact peer-reviewed scientific journals across 59 fields of medicine. And there were a few books and duplications, which is why the numbers don't add up, and all research data repositories in medicine. Now this is 935 stakeholders. And for all of these, the team searched their websites, online reports, great literature, and emailed them for missing application. And then used detailed data instruction forms to record stakeholder characteristics and data sharing policies and their characteristics. Now, this in the previous slide aimed to do 2 things. First of all, they aim to show off all the work the team did, but also to show you that there's a lot more to this research than I can show you today in the 10 minutes I have. So I will give you some selective outcome reporting, apologize in advance. We are publishing this, and we're also currently working on an online dashboard to kind of show and present all the data for people that are interested. I have another disclosure to make. I'm also not sticking to reporting standards here. I'm going to present to you for each of the stakeholders some key findings, but then also give you a little interpretation. So for the 110 health research funders, we found that 55% recommended or required data sharing. And interestingly, funders were more likely to require or recommend data sharing if they were a pharmaceutical or biotech funder in a high income country or based in North America. So whilst 4 in 5 private funders recommended or required data sharing, only 2 in 5 publicly, so taxpayer funded funders did so. And I think whilst these good results can give us some optimism about funders' awareness of data sharing, particularly public funders, in my opinion, could and should do more. And funders could play a major role in supporting data sharing by providing the monetary resources to prepare and share data. Now, in ethics committees, we included 124 and only 4 recommended data sharing, none required it. All of these were from high-income countries. So we see a major untapped potential in ethics committees, particularly because in previous research, we found that a major barrier to data sharing are ethical concerns. So concerns about participant privacy, informed consent, and ethical approval. For the 18 trial registries we included, only 1 recommended data sharing, and none specifically mentioned COVID-19 data sharing. However, 15 registries required a data sharing statement at registration. So asking registrants, what are you intending to do upon completion? So I think those data sharing statements can be an important first step. It's important to remember, though, that trial registries at the moment are only mandatory for interventional studies. So they're missing a lot of observational studies for. And I also think there may be a role for clinical trial registries to recommend or even actively support data sharing beyond just asking for statements. For journals, we found that 64% have some kind of data sharing policy in which they recommend or even require data sharing. And 68% ask for data sharing statement, again, just stating the intent to share data or not. However, only 6% specifically recommended COVID-19 data sharing. Interestingly, the impact factor did not predict data sharing recommendations or requirements of journals. Bearing in mind, these were all fairly high impact journals because we took the 5 highest impact ones. So I think there is some support already from journals for data sharing, but the question for the journal editors in the room is, could journals do more, and could the ones that mainly recommend move from recommending to requiring? And then how can we ensure those data sharing requirements are met? Because there's quite a lot of research that even if journals require data sharing, whether we're actually able to access the data is a different question, and often we are not. And lastly, data repositories. So out of the 410 data repositories, we looked at only 12% recommend or require data sharing. But this may also not have been the right question to ask, because data sharing repositories come so late in the process, and usually researchers go to them, they're already planning on sharing their data. So they may actually help address other barriers in sharing data. In previous research, we found that misinterpretation of data or misleading secondary analyses were major concerns for researchers, as well as the academic credit. And data sharing repositories could play a big role in ensuring responsibilities are met. They could also play a big role in ensuring that data that are shared are fair, so findable, interoperable, accessible, and reusable. Just a few quick highlights on what those policies looked like that recommended or required data sharing. And they were slightly conflicting across different stakeholders. So when we're looking at what study types do stakeholders recommend or require data sharing for, whilst ethics committees, journals, and data repositories said all studies, interestingly, a lot of funders and trial registries only recommended it for interventional studies, which is a surprising result, because I think sharing of observational data is equally important to that of interventional studies. What data did policies recommend or require to be shared? Whilst funders ask for all data collected during the study, journals often only ask for data underlying published results. And that is a major problem, because one of the reasons we ask for data is because we want to combat selective outcome reporting bias, and we want to check what's been done. So there may be a way, especially for journals, to look at asking for all data, not those underlying the published results. And lastly, some ask also for supporting documents such as data dictionaries, whereas others did not specify this. And I think when writing data sharing policies, that is, again, really important, because often when we receive data sets, we're not able to interpret it. So data dictionaries, protocols, and so on are really important to make sure data are not misunderstood, which should also be in the interest of the person providing the data. Now, just a few thoughts to take away from this. First of all, I believe whilst there is some movement across stakeholders, there's certainly also room for improvement. A lot of stakeholders currently only recommend but not require data sharing. And I think moving toward requiring data sharing could really help. There are particularly opportunities for taxpayer-supported funders. So I found it very surprising that private funders were much more likely to require data sharing than public ones, and ethics committees who don't usually talk about data sharing at the moment. And we also found that more guidance on implementation is needed. So it's not enough to just recommend or require data sharing, but we need data sharing standards. We need to know more about the how, who, why, and then. And then very importantly, we need to decide who of those stakeholders can control this. Because just requiring something may not be enough. We also may need someone to play the data sharing police and make sure that researchers adhere to this. Get in touch if you have any, well, you can ask questions now, but if you want to know more, if you are interested in the full results of the study, you can find me on Twitter, and here's my email. Thank you.
And thank you. While people are queuing, I mean, I've got a question, which is in the work you did, you didn't ask this question specifically, but what reasons are people giving for not recommending that data should be shared?
What reasons are stakeholders giving?
For not sharing data, for not recommending that data should be shared?
Well, usually we just, they just don't have a policy at all. So it's not that I don't think we saw any journals that said, please not share your data.
I don't mean that, but I suppose it's kind of a, but if you don't recommend it, you're whether it's passive, whatever it is, you're saying you're not recommending, you aren't promoting that particular policy. So why wouldn't you do that? What kind of reasons are people giving? You didn't ask that question.
I'd like to pass this question on to all the funders and journal editors in the room. So there are some that just mention data sharing. They say, please put on a data sharing policy, data sharing statement, and they don't say anything about data sharing being good or bad. Okay. But other than that, yeah, so that.
Don't worry. I mean, actually, I didn't directly asking everybody through you. Okay, we'll start with John. I think you stood up first.
John Ioannidis, Metrics, Stanford. Really great talk and very nice overview of what's happening out there. I think that we have enough experience that there's a lot of statements about data sharing, but it doesn't really happen eventually. And the big stumbling block is that even if people say required, someone can say, well, I will share them after 5 years, or they will be somewhere, but you need to have your proposal approved, and this takes forever, and there's 5% chance that it will be approved eventually, or less. Did you sort out how many of these entities said that they recommend or require unconditional data sharing? Because I think that this is really where the big gap is. I mean, we have now data sharing statements almost always, but if you really want to get the data in an empirical analysis we did from 500 trials, right now there's only 2 trials that have the data available.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's kind of also the point I tried to make on my last slide, that it's not enough to just say we need to share data, but we need the how, the when, the what supporting documents. And there's a movement toward that, but there are gaps. And I think we need more standard data sharing policies. We need more education. So I completely agree with that. And we need to think about what happens to the trials that don't share their data. There's certainly a lot of room for improvement there.
Great. Deborah, we're just asking you to solve all the problems with data sharing. Question at the back and then at the front. That's you, maybe.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you so much. Mabel Chu from The Lancet. My question was actually going to be John's, but he's asked it. In response to Cameron's question, I think one of the reasons we're given for not sharing data is it's commercial in confidence. I am going to share a salutary lesson that we learned from the Surgisphere debacle, where people might remember it was an secondary analysis of observational data from a database that was subsequently alleged or considered to be lacking in veracity, although that's still to be proven, but the owner of the database has gone under. But one of the things that we learned was that although clinical trials are the only studies in the guidance, ICMJ guidance, requiring a data sharing statement, it's made us change our policies to also include that for observational data. And this was an observational study, as well as requiring at least one author on the study to not only say that they access that data, but that they can verify it. So at least 2 authors have to say that. I'm sorry, not one. And I'm sorry, I've just got a bit of a problem with that.
It's fine. I think no, I think you made a good point there. So
But the other thing I was going to say was that, and one of those authors has to be the academic partner if it's a commercial partnership. So sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to take one more question. Do we have any online questions?
We do not.
We do. Okay. I'll take question at the front. If the people who've had to sit down, if you could work your questions into one of the next sessions, I'll come to you. So take you at the front, then online.
Okay, I'll try to make this quick. Okay, my question is, have y'all considered, or have any of my colleagues here done outcome studies? The reason why there was a paper in one of the JAMA networks looking at why they wanted data and codes, and it was mostly for secondary analysis. Almost, when I asked the authors, how much of this was for reanalysis, replication, reassessment, and they said they don't know. They think it was small because they didn't look. It was just too small. So one of the reasons to do these, economic journals have been doing these for decades published, and that has helped prevent recurrence of methodological errors. We don't do this. We don't publish these. There's no incentive to. We're sending ours now to economic journal. So my question is, can we get any outcome studies looking at, who is doing this for reanalysis, replication, reassessment? Is that something you can, these are outcome studies, and this shows the problems, the obstacles, but it's outcome. What's the outcome? Most are secondary analysis like that one. Have you considered it, or do we have anybody here who's done it? Thank you. Or you can talk to me.
Okay. I mean, I think that's you've opened up a whole kind of conversation there. Yeah. Did you want to say anything? You don't have to.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know if anyone has gone and looked at what does every single data request do. I know there are a lot of studies looking at what kind of individual participant data meta-analysis have happened and what have they shown. So there are some really good systematic reviews giving an overview of that. I think it'd be difficult to trace, but yeah, I would be very interested to see the results. So yeah, if anyone has done that study, I was planning on get in touch.
Okay, can we quickly just take the online question if it's still there, and then we'll finish. Did we have one?
No.
No, you said no. I thought you said yes. No, thank you very much.